Hello everybody, this is John Bornschein, and this is Cable Lane. I want to thank you for tuning in again today as we continue in our study of how old is the Earth. This is part 6 in our 7-part study. So if you've missed any of the prior videos, you can go check those out on our YouTube page and also on our Facebook page, because we want to equip you, the saints, for the work of ministry after all. Perhaps you've been on the fence on these issues and you really don't know how old the Earth is. It is our hope that throughout this series you have at least been challenged to think through how the Bible has revealed the age of the earth, that in 6 literal days God created the heavens and the earth, and that the earth is really no older than 6,000 years. Yes, it's all very possible that the Bible has given us the accurate measurements of time, and this is an exciting study. So let's get right into it today. Let's begin our study in Isaiah chapter 48, verse 13. We read, "Indeed, my hand has laid the foundations of the earth, and my right hand has stretched out the heavens. When I call them, they stand up together." I love that. Let's look at 10 points for you to consider as you examine the evidence that's all around us. These are things that make scientists squirm a bit, because if they hold to an evolutionary perspective, they can't justify what we're about to talk about. There really is no evidence for evolutionary theory in what we're discussing today. So listen closely as we go through these 10 points. Number 1, sediment accumulation on the seafloor. Now this one's very important because every year 20 billion tons of dirt and rock from all of the continents are deposited on the sea floor. Yet our depth of the ocean, the seabed floor, is no deeper than 1,300 feet. It should be at least 250 times more than that if the Earth was even more than 10,000 years old. Number 2, let's look at the bent rock layers. Now, if you've ever hiked and you've seen some layers, what look like strata layers on the mountain sides, what you'll see is that sometimes these are bent. It looks like all of these layers have been bent over simultaneously. Now, if they'd been laid down over millions of years, they should have been fractured. But that's not what we see. Rather, we see that they've all been moved together, something that happened together, something that happened very swiftly, and yes, very dramatically. And Scripture tells us a lot about this. In fact, in Genesis chapter 7 to 8, during this global cataclysmic flood, we see that Noah and his family were on the ark 40 days and 40 nights it rained. But the duration of the time that they were on the ark was about 370 days. During that time, the earth went through dramatic changes all at once. And that's certainly what science reveals to us as well. That might be part of what some call the polar axis shift. Number 3, soft tissue still in fossils. There was a recent discovery of a Tyrannosaurus rex that was found in Hell Creek Formation in Montana, and it was studied under a microscope. A femur, this was the thigh bone area of the Tyrannosaurus rex, was examined rather closely, and what they found were still the remnants of blood vessels, a type that's seen in bone marrow specifically, and it contained what appeared to be red blood cells with nuclei, typically found in reptiles and birds. Even flexible tissue still discovered within the bone. That's what they discover when they examine closely Egyptian mummies or even ancient human beings. We've seen a few of those over the years, such as one that was found in the Alps in 1991. But all of those particular bone types were around 5,000 years old. So here we have a Tyrannosaurus rex that's revealing the same thing of an age of human beings around 5,000 years. Number 4, faint sun paradox. Now, there's a lot of theory, a belief about how the sun creates its power. One such theory is about the fusion of hydrogen into helium deep inside the sun's core. Now, that creates a huge problem because as hydrogen fuses, it should change the composition of the sun's core, gradually increasing the sun's temperature. That means that as the sun gets hotter, what that also reverse engineered tells us is that the Earth was colder then in the past. Now, if you add millions of years to the equation, that means that the Earth was below freezing about the time when life was suddenly being spawned on the Earth, right? So we don't have enough time in that sequence. That means that the Earth is still relatively young, less than 10,000 years by this comparison with how the sun is aging. So we look at all of the astronomical events, the anomalies that we've talked about over the last couple weeks of the size of the sun, the age of light that's hitting the earth, the age of comets, or even the dust levels on the moon. All of it points to a rather young Earth. Number 5, rapidly decaying magnetic field. This is a big one. We're surrounded by a magnetic field that protects all living things from solar radiation. But that field is wearing down. It also tells us that there's entropy all around us. Anywhere in the universe you look, you're not seeing things getting more complex or growing in sophistication, but rather there's a disintegration. That's the entropy that's in the universe. Well, this magnetic field that surrounds the Earth is also decaying. And at its current rate of deterioration, that field indicates that it's only about 6,000 years old. Helium in radioactive rocks, number 6. While drilling deep within the Precambrian granite-type rocks in New Mexico, geologists discover zircon crystals. Okay, so these zircon crystals were found at these incredibly deep layers of the Earth. And these crystals contained not only uranium, but also large amounts of helium. Now, the hotter the rocks, the faster the helium should escape. But these hottest zircons that they found at around 387 degrees Fahrenheit contained far more helium than expected. Now, 58% of helium that the uranium could have ever generated was still present inside these crystals. Now, geologists tell us that that should have leaked out in less than 100,000 years. So these pre-flood rocks have an average diffusion rate of only 6,000 years, give or take about 2,000 years. How about the carbon-14 dilemma? Now, radioactive form of carbon that scientists use to date fossils, that's called carbon-14. It decays so quickly with a half-life of only 5,730 years. So none of it is expected to remain in fossils after only a few 100,000 years. So yet, the irony in all this is that they keep saying they're discovering carbon-14 in all of these ancient fossils. If every atom in the whole Earth were carbon-14, they would decay so quickly that no carbon-14 would be left on the Earth after 1,000,000 years. So how could the Earth be billions of years, and certainly how could these fossils be hundreds of millions of years and still have carbon-14 in them? It's just not possible with what we're seeing. Number 8, very little sea salt in the sea. Some 458 million tons of sodium mixes in the ocean water every single year, but only 122 million tons, that's 27%, is removed by a natural process. That means that the seas should be much saltier than they are, but that's not what we're seeing. In fact, that would suggest that we're a rather young Earth. Number 9, ancient bacteria like the Lazarus bacteria still contain DNA. And any evolutionist, especially any scientist out there, will tell you that no DNA that is nearly identical to modern DNA should exist in any of these samples due to the deterioration rates that they've tracked. And yet that's not what we're seeing. Number 10, fossilization. Now, we've often talked about dinosaurs when we examined creation versus evolutionary theories, but life began suddenly. That's what the evidence reveals to us. And science tells us it looks like life began suddenly and later was fossilized suddenly. You even have radical change all at once across the climate of the Earth. Mammoths with food still in their mouths, fish in the process of consuming other fish. We have fossils of octopus still with the suckers on their tentacles. Not only did that move them up in this evolutionary timetable, but it gives evidence for the flood all simultaneously. Again, the evidence is all there, but many who hold to an evolutionary theory or an old Earth theory actually have to have almost greater faith, it seems, to hold to such things, because the Bible is very clear on the age of the Earth and that God is the one who created these things, and all science supports it it if it doesn't have an agenda. I hope this has been encouraging to you. We've got one more video to come, and I encourage you to share it with your friends and family alike. God bless you, my friends. Take care.